Well, growing concerns that Russia will take over more of Ukraine today as the U.S. and European allies try to figure out how to stop Vladimir Putin from further destabilizing the region. But are political analysts here at home really showing too much sympathy for Vladimir Putin on Ukraine, particularly on his defense that Crimea used to be part of Russia? Well, our next guest has some interesting ideas on that, writing in the Wall Street Journal. Mr. Putin is also pursuing his own interests as ringleader in a corrupt oligarchy, sitting on the economic time bomb that is a commodities-based economy. The best U.S. policy will seek to light the shortage fuse on that bomb, strengthen our allies, and contain the fallout. Joining me now, the author of that, Bret Stephens, foreign affairs columnist for the Wall Street Journal. So the president is talking about nuclear bombs going off in Manhattan. You're saying light the fuse. I'm thinking I should, I got to invest in canned foods at this point. Bret, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, let me underscore. It was a figure of speech in case some of our readers
take it a little literally.
Took it a little too literally. Look, we want to accelerate the collapse of the Putin regime. That should be the principal goal of American policy. That is actually a pro-Russia policy because Putin preys on his own middle class, on his own people, and of course, as we know, on his own neighbors. One of the things we'd like to do is accelerate capital flight out of Russia. We're looking at $70 billion worth of capital flight. We want to penalize the oligarchs who are close to Putin and maybe handling a lot of Kremlin money. And most of all, what we want to be doing is increasing not only the supply of natural gas and oil here at home, but also our trade with Western Europe, countries that are heavily dependent right now on those Russian energy supplies.
And you say really go after him and don't have any pause to it. You went through some of, in your piece, your column, some of this hand-wringing about whether or not we can judge Vladimir Putin. Here we went into Iraq, one analyst said, and some accused us of being occupiers. So isn't Vladimir Putin sort of doing the same thing? And there's this equivocation of that.
Exactly. There's been a tremendous amount of moral equivalence, and I'm glad you asked that, Jenna, because we have to make a distinction. Okay, we had a 12-year crisis with Iraq in which Saddam was violating one binding UN Security Council after another. We gave Saddam opportunity after opportunity to meet demands from the international community. He never did. We went in, we took out, let's face it, an evil dictator. Okay, we sacrificed 4,400 American lives fighting al-Qaeda, Ba'athist holdouts, Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and so on, to try to stand up, as imperfect as it was, a relatively representative government that doesn't threaten its people and doesn't threaten its own neighbors. How is that remotely comparable to Putin using a transparently bogus pretext to seize a piece of territory that may have once have been Russian, but hey, it was Turkish before that?
What do you think that's about? I mean, there's the questioning, and which is great about our country, that we can have open debate about how we feel about what's going on in the world. But what do you think is that pause about whether or not we can truly judge Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, well, there's a kind of a moral embarrassment that takes place, especially in certain political quarters in this country, that says, well, because we have sinned at this or that juncture, or allegedly sinned at this or that juncture in our history, we cannot stand up against naked aggression and make a statement about that. And I think that's simply wrong, and I think it plays into Putin's hands. He wants us to say, well, I went into Crimea just as you went into Iraq. By the way, just to be clear, there are other countries that could have, quote, historic claims. Poland could have a historic claim to parts of Western Ukraine. Poland is a modern democracy that doesn't use history to justify aggression.
Just real quick here, we're awaiting the president. He's going to be speaking, and we expect 15 minutes to half an hour, and he's going to have a speech that really addresses Ukraine and talks a lot about Europe. One of the things that you touched on as we wrap up here is just the size of Russia as a country. And Vladimir Putin could be in power for, what, another 10 years legally as president?
Oh, I think Vladimir Putin wants to be president for life.
So what do you think needs to be said, especially in a speech that's coming up in Europe by the president to address the situation?
Well, again, he has to personalize this. He has to say this is not about the Russian people whom we respect. This is about our policy to make sure that a regime that is aggressive to its neighbors and that is stealing from its own people doesn't get a pass and isn't allowed to rewrite sovereign borders. It sets a terrible precedent for the rest of the world, and we are going to make Putin and his coterie pay.
Does he have to explain why we can say that?
Well, I hope he's the president. The president of the United States should not have to wring his hands in the face of a naked act of aggression against a sovereign country and an ally of the U.S.
Bret, great to see you as always.
Good to be here.
Thank you.